The state legislature is moving ahead full steam, and joining us to talk about all that's been going on the first few days of the legislature is Marianne Goodland of ColoradoPolitics.com and Blair Miller of the DenverChannel.com. Thank you both for being here. So we're back to the same issues: transportation, education, and back to promises of working together. What's different this year?
It's an election year, which means that promises of bipartisanship today may not be something that you see a month or 2 months from now. But you always start off the legislative session with these kind of promises. Last year actually was sort of a high point because they made such wonderful progress on a lot of issues that have really stymied the General Assembly for a long time. The hospital provider fee and construction defects and those kinds of things. Will they make that same kind of promise and progress on the issues that they couldn't get fixed last year? That's a really big question.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because the governor, Democrats, and Republicans all seem to have some overlapping concerns here where they all want to address the same things, but they all seem to be a little bit far apart on where they want, what they want to address specifically and how they want to do it.
Well, we know the legislature has this extra money that they get their hands on this year. Will that all go to transportation?
Not all of it, but most of it. The governor took $148 million, or he asked the Joint Budget Committee to modify his budget proposal to put $148 million toward transportation projects. But you can't even, that's not enough to bond against if you want to raise $9 billion.
Yeah, we still have way bigger traffic issues to deal with.
A bond payment for $9 billion, which is sort of the current wish list for transportation, takes about $300 million a year. So you can see that they're still not there. Now, the governor said in his State of the State address that he wants to go to voters and talk to them about this. Democrats believe the same thing. They want to ask for an increase in state sales tax, perhaps. But
Republicans have pushed back on that, on sending it to the voters.
Absolutely. Senate Bill 1, which is the Republicans' top priority in the Senate, says let's go to the voters and ask them to approve the state issuing bonds or getting into the bond market to do transportation. But it's using existing revenues. It's not asking for a state sales tax increase, for example.
So what do you see moving forward in terms of legislation? What do you think the first issues
I think Senate Republicans are really going to push that one really hard. I mean, transportation's definitely the biggest issue of this whole session. I think everyone will tell you that on both sides. And I think that, yeah, that's going to be one of those bills that we see like last year that starts out as something, and perhaps it stays as Senate Bill 1, but some of those big bills got combined into bigger bills last year, and I think that could happen again this year.
And we've heard a lot of talk about education as well. What will that look like? What kinds of bills are we talking about here?
Well, there have been two interim committees that have been meeting during the summer to look at a rewrite of the School Finance Act. And we haven't seen those bills yet to see what kinds of ideas they're coming up with. But I've also heard some concerns from lawmakers that they don't believe the right people are being involved in these conversations. For example, school superintendents, who are the folks who are on the ground and know the daily, and they really have not been included in that. So whether or not that those bills coming out of school finance actually succeed is a good question, and some people are saying it's not enough time. They need to take more time to look at this issue.
Okay. Is the legislature done dealing with these issues of sexual harassment, the Steve Lebsock issue?
Not at all. Not at all.
I think we heard plenty in the first couple days of the session about this issue. I think certain people are a lot more willing to talk about it and want to keep talking about it than other people on various ends of the spectrum. But yeah, I think we're far from done with this whole thing. And the group that's supposed to be making these reforms is still meeting.
And these investigations are still ongoing. We have 3 that are still in process, and until those investigations are concluded, this is an issue that's going to hang over the General Assembly in both chambers.
The failed special session dealing with the pot tax, what's happened with that?
Nothing.
Nothing, right?
And the thing that was amazing to me was that in all the speeches that were made in the first 2 days of the session, both by the legislative leaders and by the governor, not one of them brought this issue up. I kind of think of it as a burning pile of dog poo that nobody wants
no
to
one
step
wants to
on.
deal with.
Nobody
yes.
wants to step on.
It's like they totally forgot about all of that discord right there in the fall last year and are back to celebrating all their bipartisan wins from last year.
All right, so we have less than a minute. What else will we see our legislature doing this year?
Rural broadband is going to be one of the big drivers, I think, in this session, maybe secondary to the transportation issue. The governor wants very much to see something move forward, a big solution, and there is a big bill, Senate Bill 2, that was introduced on the first day of the session that will make some big changes in how a special state fund that helps pay for these things gets distributed.
And Blair?
Right, and yeah, I mean, the rural priorities beyond broadband, even healthcare, education, I think rural Colorado is going to get addressed this session in some form, which I think everybody's been talking about for years and years and years now, but you've got a package of opioid-related bills, and there's stuff with the Gallagher Amendment, as you kind of mentioned there, which is far too complicated to talk about in 30 seconds, but I think there's some issues around that and school funding that we'll see addressed.
Well, we know you two will be watching. We will be watching as well. Thank you so much, Blair Miller, Marianne Goodland, as always. By the way, if you have a question or a segment idea for us, you can tweet us anytime at Denver 7 Politics. And don't forget, you can watch today's segments anytime at thedenverchannel.com/Politics Unplugged. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you back here next Sunday for another edition of Politics Unplugged.